wasn't accepted 10, 20 years ago for having a male working for a female. But I think that the females, as we minorities, are showing or have shown that they can be just as good.
Here was a fellow who, late in life, at least late in his business career life, was shucking everything that he'd done and was embarking on a very risky thing, a brand new idea.
Folks gave me an opportunity to see people make a very comfortable living by using their brains and not their hands. Got an accounting degree, I worked hard, I have a CPA certificate, I have a very comfortable job. I've received 7 promotions in 6 years with the main company. I would not have done that without the help of INROADS.
Many people, white, black, and brown, helped founder Frank Carr turn his dream into reality.
I'd like to introduce you to Frank Carr for some comments that I think you'll find very appropriate for the evening. Frank?
I'm a very fortunate person in that some 15 years ago, I did dream a dream, and you people have made it happen. So I'm fortunate, and I'm also very appreciative that you proved that dream could be a reality. You proved that the talent that I believed was out there in America and the black and brown communities was indeed there. So I'm a very fortunate person, and I have you all and your predecessors to thank for it.
It's good to be here with all of you tonight, if not physically, at least in spirit. And I certainly am here in spirit. I have a deep love for INROADS, as those of you who know me, I'm sure, realize. 17 leading futurists, those who predict the challenges that we may face in the 21st century, recently offered their views in a book entitled What Futurists Believe. They talk about the increasing complexity of life due to rapid developments in science and technology. They express particular concerns over environmental damage, uncontrolled population growth, the depletion of energy resources, the worldwide lack of cooperation in the political and economic sphere, and the production and distribution of nuclear weapons. True, they do see hopeful signs, such as the trend towards the equality among sexes and the trend towards a workforce of greater ethnic diversity. However, they conclude by questioning whether social and governmental institutions are equipped to cope with the challenges that they foresee in the future. And in particular, they question the ability of the American educational system to meet the demands of the future. And while they see corporations as the largest single factor in our society, capable of shaping our political and social agenda, they question the ability of corporations to do that. All of this suggests that there is a developing leadership crisis in our country. I trust that our students will continue to be pleasant to be around, comfortable with themselves, and generally able to strike a responsive chord with others. I trust that they will be able to disagree with others without losing their respect, that they will be principled without being closed-minded or contentious. I trust that they will be motivated more by the prospect of success than restrained by the fear of failure. That they would rather say yes and pick up the pieces later than say no and forever wonder what might have been. And as they mature, I trust they will subordinate rules and regulations guidelines and handbooks to the demands of each situation. But we all know that something more is required of leaders besides competence and commitment. That something more has been described as a combination of vision, mission, and moral leadership. It is a quality found in great leaders over the ages. Let's briefly look at the lives of three such leaders to see what insights we can gain. Moses led a community much like ours today, in that it was a community in transition. In his case, from slavery in Egypt to the land of freedom and plenty, the Promised Land. He was willing to give his life to make that dream of the Promised Land a reality, even though he knew in his heart that that dream would not be realized in his lifetime. Truly, he was a man with a vision. Like other great leaders, Moses had a deep sense of his own unworthiness, his own inadequacy. He also expressed much frustration and even despair at the short-sightedness of the people that he was called to lead. But that sense of inadequacy and that frustration was transformed by the power and presence of God's love in his life. He learned to be patient with himself and with the people he served. And he learned that tiredness and strain are not the necessary byproducts of being a leader. That was an important lesson too. A leader can and should delegate and share responsibility. All in all, he was a man of faith. The next leader I offer for your consideration was an odd-looking person with his naked brown legs, his bald head, and his emaciated body. Wise in the ways of the East, most Westerners found him disconcerting, to say the least. Yet his life was marked by a wholeness and a wisdom, an integrity and a spiritual consistency uncommon among world leaders. His way was no secret. It was simply to follow his conscience without regard for the consequences to himself, in the belief that this was demanded of him by God, and that the results would be the work of God. Perhaps for a long time these results would remain hidden as God's secret. But in the end, the truth would manifest itself. A Hindu, he possessed a thorough knowledge of the New Testament. Indeed, he applied gospel principles to the problems of political and social existence, in the belief that such problems were inseparably political and religious at one and the same time. His peaceful, nonviolent way was in stark contrast to a world that too often sought to achieve its ends through violence, through greed, through cruelty, through lust. He frequently fasted. He observed days of silence. Aware of the value of solitude, he often went on retreat. In his search for a peace based on justice, he generously gave his time and energy to others, listening to them, communicating with them. I'm sure by now you know who I'm talking about. It's Mahatma Gandhi. The last leader I would like to hold up for your reflection and emulation might seem to be the least impressive of them all on first glance. An unknown author described him as follows. He was born in an obscure village, the child of a peasant woman. He worked in a carpenter shop until he was 30. Then for 3 years he was an itinerant preacher. He never wrote a book. He never held an office. He never owned a home. He never had a family. He never went to college. He never traveled 200 miles from the place where he was born. He never did any of the things that are usually associated with greatness. While he was still a young man, the tide of public opinion turned against him. His friends ran away. He was turned over to his enemies. He went through the mockery of a trial. He was nailed to a cross between two thieves. While he was dying, his executioners gambled for the only piece of property he had on earth, and that was his coat. When he was dead, he was laid in a borrowed grave through the pity of a friend. The author concludes, "Yet all the armies that ever marched, and all the navies that were ever built, and all the parliaments that ever sat, and all the kings that ever reigned, put together, have not affected the life of man on earth as has that one solitary life." Perhaps none of Jesus' teachings are more important to modern man, and therefore to their leaders, than his teaching on forgiveness. He taught that man has the power to turn from evil to good, to change, and that the very act of turning from evil brings God's forgiveness. When you think of it, those who do not forgive are those who are least capable of changing their lives. In this sense, forgiveness is a shrewd and practical strategy for a person or a nation to pursue. Not to forgive is to be imprisoned by the past, by old grievances that do not permit life to proceed with new business. Not to forgive is to yield oneself to another's control. If one does not forgive, then one is controlled by the other's initiatives and is locked into a sequence of act and response, of outrage and revenge, of tit for tat, escalating always. The present is endlessly overwhelmed and devoured by the past. Forgiveness, then, frees the forgiver. Actually, it frees him to love, to be compassionate. From the examples I've given, I'm sure it's obvious that I believe there's a religious and moral dimension to leadership. A dimension, I might add, that I too often find lacking today. However, this is not a sectarian appeal. Fundamental conflict in our society is not among churches. It is between religion on the one hand and secularism on the other hand. People can and must respect one another's beliefs, but they also need beliefs. They also need beliefs to be respected. What I am saying then does not touch on church-state relations. The issue is not establishing a state religion. It is ensuring that faith and moral values play their proper role in shaping culture and in contributing to the well-being of society and the happiness of individuals. As INROADS prepares leaders for the 21st century, I challenge its leadership to find creative ways to make religious and moral values more central to the selection and training of our students. It can be done. Where there's a will, there's a way.
I often talk about a boxer being in a ring and being periodically decked, and the way they keep coming back for more. You just can't get them down. And that's the quality that our young people need. in order to survive in corporate America.